The scream came first, then the metal. A hard, ringing clang rolled down a concrete corridor in Colorado's high desert as red lights flashed across cameras and steel doors. Inside one small cell, a man pressed his palms to the glass and mouthed two words the microphones barely caught: "No more." Officers in black gear moved fast, the siren cut through the air, and an automated voice said, "Alpha Security, stand by." In the most controlled place in America, ADX Florence, the Supermax prison built so nothing slips, something had slipped. The man's chest rose and fell too fast. He slapped the window again. No more. The light over his door blinked green, then dead black. For 3 seconds the range went silent. In a world that runs on silence, this new silence felt wrong, like the air itself had stopped. Then the speakers crackled back to life, doors thudded, and 2 medics sprinted in with a red case. They knelt, the camera above them watching everything. One medic said, "Talk to me, sir. Stay with me." The other called for a stretcher. As they worked, men in other cells didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even blink. Every eye watched through a slit of glass. Every heartbeat waited. This is the dark reality of Supermax prisons in America, controls so tight you can feel it in your teeth, and pressure so constant you forget what normal sounds like. People think Supermax means daily fights and chaos. That's the myth. The truth is quieter and heavier. It is the click of cuffs, the hum of lights, the soft slide of a tray through steel. It is time, measured in inches of sunlight on concrete and in letters that arrive weeks late with stamps removed. It is 23 hours a day in a room the size of a bathroom, alone. ADX Florence sits at the center of this story, but it is not alone. There are other Supermax units across the country, state control units, in places like California and Virginia, high-security federal ranges in places you've never heard of, each built on the same idea: isolate to keep order. The rules are strict. The routines are exact. The sound of your own breath becomes a clock. Our narrator in this chapter is a reporter named Jordan Hale. He has spent a year reading public reports, court filings, and interviews with people who know these places from the inside: officers, psychologists, former inmates, family members. He came here to learn the difference between the story people tell and the life people live. A week before the scream, the day on Range C began the way every day begins. Lights up at 6. Count. Breakfast, milk, oatmeal, a slice of bread. The voice on the speaker was calm, always calm. Cells stayed shut. In this unit, men earned an hour of recreation alone in a high-walled pen open to the sky. Some did push-ups. Some stood still and looked up. A few talked quietly to themselves just to remember their voices. If a book cart came, it rolled by in silence. If a letter came, it was scanned first, sometimes redacted, sometimes delayed. Calls were rare and monitored. The man who screamed, "Let's call him Aaron," had been here long enough to learn the art of counting. 6 steps from bed to door. 2 seconds for the lock check. 4 minutes to eat slow. He counted the holes in the vent and the tiny chips in the paint he did not make. He counted the days since he last saw a tree, then stopped counting because numbers turned into feelings he couldn't touch. Jordan met an officer who described it like this: in a normal prison, you spend your energy breaking up trouble. In Supermax, you spend your energy keeping the peace inside the head. A prison psychologist said something similar in a public interview: isolation can cause sleep problems, anxiety, and, for some people, hearing things that are not there. Not because THEY are weak, she said, but because humans are built for people, and Supermax is built to remove people. Aaron tried to build a small world that wouldn't break him. He did math with crumbs. He walked tight, slow circles. He mouthed the names of every street he grew up on so he would not lose them. He saved the corner of every napkin and traced a star with his fingernail where no one could see. He waited for letters. His mother mailed him pictures of her backyard: a peach tree, a blue plastic chair, a dog asleep in a patch of light. He held those pictures in his head until they felt real. On Tuesday, his recreation hour was cancelled for the whole range. A routine check needed more time, the speaker said. He listened to the hallway, hoping for footsteps that meant the day would change. None came. He sat on the floor and leaned against the bed frame and breathed. When the light from his narrow window hit the sink at 10 a.m. he told himself, "This is morning." When it slid under the door at 2 p.m. he said, "This is afternoon." When the ceiling hummed a little louder, he said nothing. Across the country, other Supermax units ran the same quiet script. In California, a man sat in a gray cell and tapped a code on the wall to no one in particular, because tapping was a way to say, "I am still here." In Virginia, a woman in a high-security segregation unit folded and unfolded the same letter until the crease felt like a friend. In the Midwest, a psychologist logged notes, restricted effect, limited speech, reports of loneliness. The words were clean and official. The feelings behind them were not. Back in Colorado, Jordan stood in an observation room and listened to a former ADX officer who agreed to speak on the record. "The myth," the officer said, "is that these guys are plotting every minute. The reality is they're surviving every minute. So are we. You have to be perfect. One mistake, and the whole place feels it." "Does the place help people get better?" Jordan asked. "Ked," the officer stared at the monitor, at the small spaces, the tight edges of light. "That's not what it's built for," he said. Then came Friday. It started with a cough. Aaron felt a stone under his sternum that would not move. He drank water. He pressed his palm to the cool steel. He did not press the call button because pressing the call button meant making a need into noise, and he had taught himself not to do that. By noon the pressure had spread across his chest like a flat hand. At 1:14 p.m. he pressed the button. "Medical," he said. "Please." The speaker said, "Stand by." Stand by can feel like forever when the room is small. 3 minutes later, the door's small light glowed green. 2 officers stood outside, calm and quick. "Back up. Cuff port." He turned, put his hands through the slot, felt the cuffs click. The door opened, and the world got bigger and brighter and colder all at once. The medics came fast. "Talk to me." He tried. The words rolled and fell. Jordan wrote in his notebook, "This is a place designed to prevent every possible emergency, which means when an emergency happens, it looks like a system arguing with itself. Move fast, move safe, move by the book." They laid Aaron flat and checked his pulse. The siren stung the air, the range locked down, the hallway filled with boots and radio codes. A camera watched the whole thing in smooth, unblinking clarity. One medic said, "Pulse weak." Another said, "Ready." A shock gel smell cut through the disinfectant. Somewhere down the corridor a different door clanged, another check, another routine, proof that even in crisis the machine keeps turning. They shocked him once. His body jerked. The camera blinked as if it had flinched. Again, the medic said that in the cells around them, men stared at the ceiling and remembered sunsets. Some shut their eyes. One whispered a prayer for a stranger. No one moved. There was nowhere to go. Jordan, behind the glass, felt the room press in, not because it was small, but because it was so completely under control. Here is the part people don't see. Officers who have done this 100 times still feel it every time. Medics who speak in short, careful sentences because long ones might break. A prison like this is hard on the people who live in it and the people who keep it running. The dark reality isn't just iron and concrete. It's the weight of constant control on every mind it touches. "Pulse?" the medic asked, faint. They moved to lift him. The stretcher wheels squeaked. The door hissed. The siren cut out. For one breath the entire range held still, like the building had leaned forward to listen, and then, just as they started down the hall, the overhead lights flickered, once, twice, and went out. Darkness swallowed the corridor. The red emergency strips along the floor glowed to life like thin veins. Radios spat static. The camera feed in the observation room went to a gray screen with a single line of text, "Signal lost." Someone in control said, "Stand by for generator." But the generator did not start. Far away, in another state Supermax unit, a different control room recorded a note at the exact same time, "Brief power loss, no cause found." In the dark, an officer whispered, hold position. The medics froze. The stretcher hung in space. The only sound was the soft, quick rhythm of a breath that might have been Aaron's or might have been the building's. Then, from somewhere beyond the bend of the corridor, a single, precise sound tapped the metal, tap, tap tap, tap, an old code from older prisons, a way of saying, "Are you there?" Every officer turned toward it. Jordan's pen stopped moving, the red strips on the floor pulsed once, like a heartbeat, and in that narrow, humming dark, the dark reality of Supermax made real, something answered the tapping from inside the walls. The lights came back on 32 seconds later, but to everyone inside ADX Florence, it felt like hours. The sirens restarted, softer this time, almost apologetic. Officers blinked against the sudden brightness, and the medics pushed the stretcher forward. Aaron's arm slipped, one cuff hanging loose, and the metal clinked against the bar, that same rhythm from the darkness, tap, tap tap, tap. When the generator finally stabilized, the control room screens flickered back to life, but something was different. The cameras on Range C showed nothing unusual, except one small detail. On the inside of Aaron's door, the words, "Are you there?" were written in fog, as if someone had breathed against the glass. The officers swore the door had been dry the moment before the lights went out. The medics had gloves on. The walls were cold. There was no way to make condensation appear that fast, probably just stress, someone said. "Just move him." They wheeled Aaron out, and the hallway swallowed them in silence once more. 2 days later, the prison was running normally again. Or so the report said. But inside, the air had changed. Officers spoke in shorter sentences. The lights in Range C stayed a little dimmer than before. No one could explain the outage. It wasn't on the state grid, and it wasn't a wiring fault. The backup logs showed something stranger, a manual override from inside the system. That same day, across the country in another federal Supermax unit in Illinois, an officer reported hearing faint tapping in an empty corridor, identical rhythm, same pattern. The logs later showed that the timestamp matched ADX's power outage to the second. Jordan Hale returned to ADX to finish his story. He wasn't supposed to go back, but when the Bureau approved another supervised visit, he jumped at it. He brought his recorder, notebook, and one question: what does the dark reality of Supermax really mean, for the people who live here and the ones who run it? His escort this time was Warden Whitlock, a quiet man with silver hair and a voice like gravel. As they walked past rows of thick steel doors, Jordan noticed something odd. Most of the cells were spotless, but a few had small scratches on the walls near the floor. Tiny marks, like someone had dragged a spoon or a nail back and forth in the same spot for months. Whitlock saw him looking. "Some inmates count the days that way," he said. "Doesn't that damage the concrete?" "It's harder than their hope," the warden said softly. They stopped near Range C. It was quiet, too quiet. Whitlock's radio hissed once, then cut out. The officer walking with them adjusted his earpiece, frowned, and tapped the transmitter. "No signal in this corridor sometimes," Whitlock said. "Old wiring. Happens once in a while." Jordan looked up. The camera above them was dark. "Can I see Aaron's cell?" he asked. The warden hesitated, then nodded. Inside, the room was smaller than Jordan expected. The walls were clean now, repainted a pale gray. The narrow window pointed toward the cloudy sky. The only sound was the faint hum of the ventilation system. Jordan turned on his recorder. "This is Range C, cell 311, he said quietly. "The inmate who collapsed here, his last words were, 'No more.' The reports say he survived. I'm here to understand what that meant." He stopped the recorder, then something happened. From somewhere in the vent, faint and slow, came a single metallic tap. Then another. Then 3 in rhythm, tap, tap tap, tap. The officer stiffened. Whitlock frowned. "Probably a pressure valve," he said, but his voice didn't sound convinced. Jordan leaned closer to the vent, pressing his ear to the wall. The tapping stopped. Then, faintly, a whisper came through the air current, not loud enough to make words, just a shape of sound that he pulled back. "Did you hear that?" Whittle. Ock didn't answer. He clicked his radio again, but the static only grew louder. Later, in the control room, Jordan reviewed the sound recording. The tapping pattern was clearer now. He played it again, slower. The rhythm wasn't random, it matched a code he'd read about in prison archives. 3 taps for A. 2 short, 1 long for R. He wrote it down, letter by letter. The final message spelled AR. He stopped before the last letter could finish. The tape ended abruptly with the sound of the cell door locking, even though no one had touched it. Outside, the snow had started to fall again over the Colorado desert. Jordan drove back toward his motel, headlights cutting through the white. He couldn't stop replaying the moment in his mind, the tapping, the whisper, the fog on the glass. None of it made sense, not in a place built for precision. He checked his phone. No signal. Halfway to town, he saw the glow of a small service truck parked on the roadside. 2 men in heavy jackets were standing beside it, facing the desert. As he slowed to pass, one of them turned toward him. For a split second, Jordan thought the man's jacket said ADX Maint. But as his headlights hit the letters, they shifted, they said Supermax Repair Unit 12. He blinked, looked again, but the men were gone. The truck was still there, engine off, covered in a fine layer of dust. Jordan parked and stepped out. The wind cut cold against his face. The ground was scattered with old footprints, all leading toward the mountains. Far in the distance, he saw the faint shape of ADX Florence, a gray fortress under a silver sky. For a moment, lightning flashed, and in that flash, it looked like the whole building exhaled, a low roll of mist rising from its base. He shivered, got back into the car, and started the engine. On his dashboard recorder, a new file appeared, automatic all. Y, timestamped 5 minutes earlier, labeled auto sync. He hadn't touched the controls. He pressed play. The audio was faint but clear enough to make out the same tapping pattern. Only this time, it was complete. Areyouthre. He stared at the display as the car idled in silence, then, softly, one last word whispered through the static, still. By the time Jordan's story aired months later, ADX Florence had reported another power outage, this one shorter, only 9 seconds. But the logs showed something new, a signal sent from within the system to an address that no one could trace. It wasn't an inmate. It wasn't a guard. It was a line of code labeled Supermax Sync Node. And that line had connected to 3 other prisons, all solitary confinement facilities, at the exact same moment. Jordan wrote his final note. Maybe the dark reality of Supermax prisons isn't just the people inside them losing their voices. Maybe it's the walls learning to remember them. Outside, another storm moved across the Rockies, lightning painting the sky, and somewhere deep beneath the concrete and wire, a quiet tapping started again. Tap, tap, tap. It was still answering.